Get ready for the jaw-dropping moment when Gordon left everyone in the restaurant speechless with his angry outbursts. Before Chef Ramsay worked his magic and turned it around, of course. This diner, smack in the heart of New York's Queensboro, was originally in the hands of a married couple and had been serving since 1965. However, it's a fact of life that people get old, and that's why their sons Cal and Peter took over the reins. But don't expect the usual tight-knit sibling bond here. Those two brothers weren't exactly the best of buddies.
There's food behind because they're not grabbing the right
when they
thing.
come out. You got the ticket?
I think if I wasn't here, the diner would already be closed.
It seems like one of those siblings was all for keeping the family business going, but the other? Yeah, he couldn't care less. But hey, let's first talk about how the diner came into existence in the first place. Archie, Cal's dad, immigrated from Greece to the USA when he was just 17 years old. He worked hard for that diner, day in and day out, starting off his career as a humble dishwasher. Things were really tough for Archie, but he refused to give up. But unlike Archie, Peter wasn't as motivated.
He's not here.
No.
But he's supposed to be running the place.
In tandem with me.
So he doesn't commit to the business at all.
At all.
Yikes, Cal seemed to be the only one doing his job here, while Peter, on the other hand, was busy at his fiance's restaurant. Like, restaurants are a big responsibility. Splitting your time between two is never gonna work. But what he revealed next was the final straw for Chef Ramsay.
50 grand a year allowance.
An allowance? What is he, 12? That's totally messed up. No wonder the diner wasn't doing well.
Oh my God.
It looked like the kitchen hadn't been in the same room as a sponge in years. Chef Ramsay didn't hold back one bit when he described it, and honestly, I think comparing it to Saw was totally justified.
It's like a scene out of Saw.
I mean, I probably would have hurled being on the same block as this place. But the basement was the real shocker. It was so disgustingly dirty, I wouldn't be surprised if the entire place was covered with mold. And this makes me wonder, if the basement was that nasty, the ingredients had to have been just as awful, right? Well, after that disappointing lunch service, Chef Ramsay was curious to know where they stored their produce. And let me tell you now, the entrance to that basement couldn't have been creepier.
It's down there.
Yeah, stepping into the basement took some serious courage. There were a treasure trove of horrifying secrets for Chef Ramsay to uncover there. It wasn't just about the surface level griminess, the issue went way deeper than that. I mean, that oven was practically swimming in liquid grease, and it was in dire need of a major scrub down. And their storage room? Ugh, that room had water all over the place, and it seemed like nobody had bothered to mop it up for a decade. But here's the kicker, that basement was massive. It was so damn big that Chef Ramsay thought he was in some kind of maze.
If I get lost down here, somebody send help.
I'm not joking here. Chef Ramsay actually got lost in the ingredients section. I can only imagine how stomach-churning that experience must have been for him. This whole situation was beyond gross.
Nothing labeled. Everything is uncovered, no dates.
That's just nasty. And don't even get me started on the fridge. It was practically a breeding ground for a whole bunch of germs, not to mention the stuff that was in there. Now, look, before you think you've seen the worst, let me remind you that we're only a couple minutes into the video here. We're not even close to being done. If you think I'm exaggerating, then wait till you see what Chef Ramsay uncovered next.
What the is that?
It's really no surprise that the famous chef was grossed out. I mean, this was just a health hazard waiting to happen, and if you think that the show was making a big deal about it for the drama, just wait till you hear about first-hand experience from one of the viewers. This viewer right here spilled the beans on just how filthy that basement truly was. Seriously though, you don't need a detective to figure out why Chef Ramsay was so grossed out. And let's not forget that the show has come under fire several times for amping up the drama for better ratings. But what this viewer has to say is proof that, at least this time around, it's as real as it gets. It's not every day that viewers get to see the raw, unvarnished truth behind the scenes, right? But when this viewer happened to walk through the kitchen, although he doesn't specify who exactly, he says that he found the owner smoking a cigarette. I don't know what's clearer than that, but this is evidence that they didn't give a shit about cleanliness at all. I wonder how he got access to the basement. Either way, it looks like it was no different than the state that Chef Ramsay found it in. The viewer continued, pointing out that old clamshells were hanging from buckets out in the open. He also happened to spot the cooling tower, which was also smeared with a murky brown layer of gonk. No wonder he wanted everybody to steer clear of this place. And it turns out it wasn't just the basement. If you pay attention during the episode, it's pretty clear the whole place wasn't much better.
Oh, hell.
But I need you to understand that that wasn't the end of it. Apparently, it even extended to the restrooms. And although we didn't get to see them on the show, another customer made a sacrifice for us to get the scoop on the situation. He described the scene as absolutely vile. And apparently, this person is a regular customer, because he ran into a nasty toilet on 2 separate occasions. If you thought that was revolting, the women's restroom wasn't any better. This one woman came across a nightmarish scene when she found shit, like literal shit, smeared all over the toilet paper roll. And this loser who did it actually put that mess back onto the dispenser. Like, I don't even know what to say, that's so disgusting. Imagine you're at this place for a pleasant evening, hoping for some pleasant food, though that's a whole other can of worms, and this is what you get? I'd lose my appetite in an instant and get out of that place right then and there. No looking back. But hold on, the story doesn't end there. This dude here knows what's up in the diner. This viewer, going by the name Supermarket Popular 17, claimed that he lived just across the street from the restaurant. While he wasn't a big fan of the diner and only visited the place to pick up some eggs and bacon, every single time that he walked in, he was welcomed by a terrifying sight. Remember the lobster tank?
Lobster in a diner. There we are.
Yeah, the same tank Chef Ramsay picked the lobster for his lunch from. So this viewer found lobsters eating each other, and sometimes even found multiple lobsters laying dead in the tank. Ugh. Like, there's a reason why restaurants keep lobsters alive before cooking them. When they die, they let off some real nasty stuff. Now, do you guys remember the infamous lobster tank that sent a customer to the hospital?
A dead lobster.
Everything else in there, they've been feeding off that lobster. Then they become full of bacteria.
Which makes me wonder, what's the point of having a lobster tank when you can't even maintain it? Well, obviously the customer was disgusted. However, despite complaining about the ghastly state of it on every visit, the staff would just remove the carcass and continue on with their daily routine like it was nothing. That's it. No wonder this place was being run into the ground. And now that we've seen the stuff that the cameras never had the pleasure of capturing, let's dive back into the other atrocities that Chef Ramsay was about to uncover. First up, let's take a peek into the meat fridge, and fair warning, what he stumbled upon next could possibly be the nastiest thing you've ever seen.
Oh my god. I don't think anyone's got any idea what is going on here.
Yup, what you're looking at is a whole month's worth of meat sitting in rotting liquid, waiting to be whipped up into someone's meal. You gotta hand it to Chef Ramsay though, the guy's got nerves of steel and a stomach of iron. Again, I don't think I'd last 15 seconds here. I mean, just look at this.
Oh my god.
If that isn't revolting, I don't know what is. Just imagine how long that chicken had been sitting in that tub in order to ooze a bucket full of that slimy liquid. Chef Ramsay was clearly on a rampage. He wanted to get his hands on every corner of the walk-in refrigerator, and the more that he looked, the more that he found.
No.
Damn, they really came out swinging with this new season, didn't they? But seriously, could things get any more revolting than this? It's downright disgusting that they had the audacity to keep running the place in spite of all this quite literal shit. I'm wondering, did the brothers who owned the place have any clue about what was going on back there? Now, let's not forget that Cal claimed that he, himself, had paid a visit to this hellhole just 2 days prior to Chef Ramsay's visit. If this was the situation with his so-called routine inspection, then I wonder what horrors would happen if they neglected it completely. Clearly, Cal wasn't a good liar. It would have been better for him to simply accept the negligence and promise to be responsible in the future. But no, he wasn't in any mood to take the blame. What's more, after the episode aired and the reality of the diner was out in the open, both the brothers stepped in to do some much needed damage control. Trying his very best to save face, Cal took to Instagram to explain the situation.
My biggest fear is the chicken. You know, that's something, it doesn't happen in here. You know, we have 10,000 pounds of food downstairs, stuff goes bad, it gets thrown away.
To justify the disgusting sight that we saw on the show, Cal said that tons and tons of meat is brought to the diner, and sometimes, well, things just go bad. You can't help it, right? And no, I'm not making this up. Take a listen for yourselves.
It's a place we have 10,000 pounds of food downstairs. Stuff goes bad, it gets thrown away, you know? For it to be there and be found and, you know, to be shoved in my face, it was super embarrassing. You know, my brother, like we've changed a lot since then to make sure that never happens again.
What's more, to emphasize his claims, he added saying that he would feed his own 1-year-old daughter with the same food. Oh god, come on, really? The brothers clearly were chalking up the whole nightmare as being a one-time fluke. But you know what they say, the proof is in the pudding, or in this case, the chicken. Though that nasty slime does look like pudding. Anyway, it's clear that something was seriously amiss. It's honestly insane to me how far some people can just slip into denial. But Chef Ramsay just wasn't gonna let it slide. It's one thing to hear about these kitchen nightmares, but to actually be there and witness it all firsthand, that's insane. And speaking of Chef Ramsay, the man's known for his fiery temper and brutally honest reactions, but he took that credo to a whole nother level here. Cal went on to promise that they've come a long way as owners since the episode was aired. He went on to add that they now had better equipment and undertook better maintenance at the diner. On top of that, this is what he had to say about the food.
And then finally, the last big change for our customers is the smaller menu. Higher quality ingredients, better recipes, and having the food taste much better than a larger menu.
Well, I truly hope they stick to that promise. But have you noticed how Peter was so tight-lipped throughout the Coming Clean post on their restaurant page? Yeah, so I guess not everything has changed. It still looks like Cal is leading the way and Peter's taking the back seat as usual. You know, Ramsay's had his fair share of stomach-churning moments over the years, with all that raw and overcooked chicken and a never-ending supply of crab cakes that he's been served up throughout 7 seasons on the show. And it looks like season 8 is gonna be no different. Now, let's circle back to Bel Air Diner, shall we? Okay, this place has had its fair share of visits from the NYC Department of Health between 2017 and 2020. Oh, believe me, they've had their highs and lows, and I'm not just talking about their menu. The health inspection demerits have been all over the place, with their lowest score being a solid 0 and their highest reaching a not-so-great 42. If you're into statistics, the median health inspection demerit based on their history is 14.5. But here's the kicker, you can't help but notice how things took a nosedive in 2020. Yeah, we all know that the pandemic threw a wrench into the works of a lot of places, but it seems like even after the dust settled, things at Bel Air Diner just weren't getting any better. 2020 hit them real bad. 3 years later, it's a little disheartening to see that the downward trend didn't get a course correction. It's a classic reminder that maintaining hygiene and food safety standards in the restaurant biz is a year-round gig, pandemic or not. You can't just hit pause on cleanliness. It seems like Bel Air Diner learned that lesson the hard way. This joint has a bit of history, you know? It's not the first time they've shut their doors, and not just for remodeling. Back in 2007, they pulled the same stunt, closed down, gave the place a facelift, and reopened. But here's the kicker, they've gone and done it again, and this time it's for a different reason, health code violations. So when the city inspectors swung by the 57-year-old place on 21st Street and Broadway, they didn't like what they saw. They found some unwelcome guests of the creepy crawly variety, food not chilled at the right temperature, and a whole bunch of, and this is the technical term, no-nos. The city's health department spokesperson spilled the beans to patch about the sorry state of affairs. According to them, the health department's got a big job, making sure the food joints in town play by the rules and don't turn our stomachs into a war zone. And in this case, they weren't too thrilled with what they found, so they slapped the dreaded close sign on the restaurant until they could get their act together. There's even a snapshot from a Reddit post making the rounds, showing the city's closure notice proudly hanging on the diner's front door. And guess what? The restaurant chimed in with its own sign claiming that it's temporarily closed for deep cleaning. Deep cleaning, huh? Sounds like they had their work cut out for them. But the story continued in the customer reviews. And that's where our fellow diner goer talked about their experience. You can bet that it wasn't a glowing review given the circumstances. It's like an online confessional booth for folks to share their foodie nightmares. I found this review where this customer shed light on the poor quality of the food, shitty management, and servers who had no passion for their job. He claimed that he was once a loyal client, but not anymore. Hey, I can't blame him. Will the owners really put the necessary effort to turn this place around? Well, it looks like they're definitely working towards that goal. Thanks to Chef Ramsay's guidance and some serious elbow grease from the team, Bel Air Diner is now ready to welcome customers once again. They've got a fresh menu and a new look, all thanks to some major revamping. And going by the latest reviews on Yelp, most customers seem to be pleased with the changes. But this is where we arrive at the main question. Will they stick to the new standards Chef Ramsay's instilled them with, or will they fall behind and revert to their old practices like all the other restaurants? Only time will tell, I guess. But this next pair of numbskulls really tested Ramsay's tolerance, all the way back to 2008 to an Italian restaurant named Trebbiano's in Great Neck, New York. The owners, Anthony Trebbiano and his girlfriend Tiffany, were desperately trying to keep their sinking ship afloat. To make matters worse, Tiffany's parents, Joe and Pat, had invested their hard-earned savings into this culinary disaster. This was a decision they soon came to regret. When Chef Ramsay decided to investigate Anthony's culinary background, he was left stunned. Brace yourself for this bombshell, guys, because Anthony has never set foot in an Italian restaurant before. Like, ever. And yet, here he was trying to run one. Do you know why? Anthony did seem to have a reason for it.
My restaurant, my rules, and that should be the bottom line.
Do you know what that sounds like? Well, pure arrogance. The man was just 25 and fresh out of culinary school. And yet, he was overconfident enough to start his own restaurant without having any experience or money. What he said next was just jaw-dropping.
And have you trained in Italian restaurants?
No, I've not.
Oh no, he didn't. Naturally, just like me, Chef Ramsay was dumbfounded by this revelation as well. Anthony was so full of arrogance that Chef Ramsay picked up on this trait as soon as the man began to talk. And what's more, when Ramsay asked him if he was that arrogant, Tiffany and her parents sheepishly nodded in agreement. Oh boy, confidence clearly wasn't an issue here. It's like they say, when life gives you lemons, just act like you invented the lemonade. So let me sum up this story for you.
Manipulate his future father-in-law to open an Italian restaurant, having never worked in an Italian restaurant.
This guy was so full of himself that he couldn't even see what he was doing wrong. When Chef Ramsay returned for the evening service to experience the food, he found himself to be the youngest diner in the restaurant. And by a solid 30 years. I mean, just take a look around and you can see exactly what I mean.
The decor matches the clientele. Drab, fuddy-duddy, and seriously old-fashioned.
There's nothing wrong in catering to the seniors of our society, but why is the younger crowd giving this place a miss? Well, no points for guessing, since it was definitely because of the food. But how was the food exactly? I think Chef Ramsay knows how to describe it best.
It was ghastly, stone-cold, solid, and tasteless.
What's more, it wasn't just Anthony, even the flavors of his food were confused. Like, take this dish for example.
Looks like chicken, tastes like shrimp.
Ramsay was so disappointed that he sent his feedback right into the kitchen, and obviously, it didn't sit quite right with Anthony.
First dish came back, I was disgusted. I wanted to prove him wrong. I wanted to show him my cooking skills.
And you know what? It's not like Anthony was deluded or something like that. He was very much aware of his arrogance. In fact, he was even seen flaunting it.
Never really tasted things beforehand. I guess that just comes with the cocky and the arrogance of me.
Yep, and after all that, he still had the audacity to call himself a chef. Remember how he revealed that he had never had food from an Italian restaurant before?
I felt I knew everything. I still do.
One of the viewers rightfully pointed out how some people think it's okay to open a restaurant or even worse, become a chef without actually tasting the food that they serve. Anyway, it wasn't just about the food. Anthony sucked at maintaining the place as well. I could tell that Chef Ramsay wasn't prepared for what he was about to see in the kitchen. From dirty plates to slimy surfaces, Ramsay was shocked when he found this.
It's mouse or rat droppings. Oh my god.
Yikes, it looks like Anthony didn't know everything after all. That's when Chef Ramsay decided to confront him head on. And to do this, the famous chef let him out back for a debate, and boy did he not hold back. As a result though, the owner became extremely furious. When Chef Ramsay pointed towards the disgusting state of the kitchen, Anthony tried to defend himself by saying something really stupid.
That's what we have staff for, right?
Oh my god!
Yep, he never cleaned his own kitchen. Because clearly, his ego said that he was way above something like that. Oh, Anthony, that's not gonna earn you some brownie points now, is it? Chef Ramsay was struggling to contain his anger, but you could easily tell that he was frustrated at this point. He had definitely reached his breaking point, and in a fit of rage, he bluntly informed Joe and Anthony that they had no chance of turning things around. With those words, the famous chef stormed out, but not before saying something in a tone that reflected his mounting frustration.
I swear to God, I am out of here. I can't take much more of it.
That was so raw. I mean, Anthony was way over his head. People pointed out the owner's arrogance and were passionately vocal about it. Take a look at this comment where one viewer said that everyone around him knew that he was arrogant. But they just didn't know how to call him out until Chef Ramsay did it for them. This comment was still mild and toned down compared to what this next person had to say. Wow, you see that? Clearly, I don't think anyone liked Anthony that much. With that level of arrogance, what do you think must have happened to the restaurant? Well, Trebbiano's completely shut down in October of 2008, barely a month after the Kitchen Nightmares episode aired. Apparently, it was seized by the state for not paying up taxes. When I look him up as of 2023, Anthony wasn't part of the food industry anymore, and I'm glad he chose to walk away. It looks like life has humbled him because now, according to some Reddit user, he's supposedly working for some BS MLM company. Well, so much for wanting to prove Chef Ramsay wrong, right? But this next owner had Chef Ramsay at his absolute angriest. The famous chef wasn't just shouting, but trembling with fury when he confronted this owner, who was deemed to be the most notorious owner on Kitchen Nightmares. Just how many times have you seen Chef Ramsay like this?
I'm struggling here to stay in this building right now. I swear to God.
Hardly ever, right? That's only because you don't often come across people like Joe Nagy. This obnoxious guy owned Mill Street Bistro in Ohio, and if you watch this episode, I'm pretty sure you absolutely loathe the man. All throughout the episode, he did nothing but flat out lie, only to contradict himself 5 seconds later. However, he reached the peak of irony when he said this.
I am self-taught by an old-school European.
Damn, dude, you can't be self-taught if other people taught you. I mean, how ignorant could you be? And what's more? When his store-bought frozen food was criticized, he denied straight away that he was even a chef.
You're not a chef.
Did I tell you I was a chef?
You told me you trained with the best chefs in Europe.
I didn't fucking tell you that.
Was this guy high or something? I mean, he wasn't just ignorant, but also a compulsive liar too. Actually, the word loathe doesn't even begin to cut it. Viewers have way stronger opinions about this, how do I put it politely, pig-headed guy. Here's what I found on this Reddit thread. I don't think there's a better description than this because this is what Joe Nagy was. A gigantic, narcissistic loser of a subhuman who ruined the lives of everyone he touched. That's spot on. All credits to Joe for becoming one of the most unlikable owners I've ever seen. Sure, people who haven't seen the episode might find this harsh. But for the people who did, they'll probably agree with every word I just said. You see, in truth, Joe actually had an extremely talented staff, but he chose to just ruin everything. But here are a few more characteristics that I think describe him best. Dumb? Check. Egotistical? Absolutely. Mean? You bet. Joe had a knack for ripping into his employees, making them feel like absolute garbage. It's no wonder they were left in tears.
The way you treat me is disrespectful, crude.
You need to find another place to work.
I mean, this guy takes the cake when it comes to treating his staff with zero respect. He just couldn't resist meddling in the kitchen and constantly undermining and sabotaging his own chef. Remember the micro carrots?
I don't think they're there to be really eaten. That's a garnish.
Oh, so
Just to add some color.
I hope it did add some color. But that's not all. Joe had this unwavering belief that his restaurant was among the best in the world. That's rich coming from a guy whose idea of fine dining was this absurd dish. Remember the El Quesadilla? Well, here's a lesson for those of you who want to experiment with food.
It's like chewy, tough, and if there's one thing that should never go in a quesadilla, it's elk.
After the horrendous meal, Joe faced the ultimate indignity as he was thrown off his own turf, the kitchen. Despite Chef Ramsay's repeated, crystal clear instructions to remove this culinary disaster from the menu, Joe just couldn't let go of those damn El Quesadillas. And what's more, he had a peculiar way of asking for help. I mean, who asked for help like this?
Idiot! Come in here and help me instead of running your jaw.
Well, he sounds like a 5-year-old child to me, doesn't he? You see, they have this uncanny ability to parrot back the negative of whatever you just said without fully grasping the concept of editing for brevity. He seems to be stuck in a never-ending loop of stubbornness and ignorance. The problem is that Joe was clinging tightly to his own version of truth and was unwilling to budge an inch. Regardless of if there was evidence or an opportunity to learn, he just didn't care. Despite all the rebranding and menu updates, Joe went back to his old ways and the bistro ultimately closed down in 2016. When Chef Ramsay pointed out that the owner was ignorant and overly defensive, this is what Joe had to say.
If I'm all that, you're my twin.
The audacity is insane. But here comes the absolute mic drop moment.
I can cook, Joe.
Ramsay is a total savage. I mean, that's one way to shut someone up, right? But thanks to the ties with the underworld and equally horrible family dynamics, this next episode earned the title of the most disturbing one on the show. And what was the reason behind it? Of course, the owner, Alan Saffron. Well, this man deliberately chose to change his life profession. But sadly, he knew nothing about the new venture that he started, being the Burger Kitchen in Los Angeles, California. What's more, this guy also won the Dad of the Year award. And why exactly do I say this? Because he used up his son Daniel Saffron's money from his inheritance without even consulting him.
I was infuriated. Why did you do this? Without even my approval. And he's like, I thought you'd like it.
Well, that's like extremely unethical. Now, I could go into depth about this episode, but here's a no-nonsense summary from a Reddit user. So the user goes on to say how the parents gaslit their son and turned him into a nervous wreck.
It says 42. There's 2 people. Table 2 is not gonna have 42 fucking guests.
Damn, I feel so bad for him. Anyway, Alan's ignorance shows up in his understanding of the Wagyu beef, which is exactly how he pronounced it, and it turned out to be an absolute mess.
And you made this?
Yes.
It's amazing.
That is hideous.
I mean, coming from someone who knew nothing about cooking or the industry, how else were you expecting things to be? Remember how he called himself the meat sculptor?
Some people have called me a meat sculptor or a meat creator.
Well, that's only a title he could give himself. Now, I know, I wouldn't be sure if it was for me. I agree this episode was 9 kinds of crazy. Instead of taking any accountability for their lack of culinary expertise, the owner was convinced of a conspiracy. Apparently, Yelp conspired to sabotage his business by posting fake reviews. Sure, whatever. Now, Alan Saffron is no longer with us, and when you read his backstory, you'll get a little insight into his demons. I am not suggesting that this justifies his actions, but his father Abe Saffron was the most well-known mob boss in Australia. He controlled and managed some really big stuff like illegal gambling, prostitution, and liquor rackets. According to the Sydney Morning Herald, the major beneficiaries of this mafia boss's fortune were Saffron's secretary cum mistress Terry Skotchik and Melissa Hagenfelds, as well as his daughter by an earlier mistress, Byruta Rita Hagenfelds. Not just this, apparently he had half the police force on his payroll. Yep, according to the news agency, girls, gambling, and grog were what Saffron knew best. Not only did he get away with it on the home front, he also got away with it with the police. He had politicians and police in his pocket and ruthless henchmen on the payroll. Considering how he had a pretty rough background, I'm glad that Alan decided to snap out of it and make a life for himself. I mean, that certainly deserves some appreciation. But the fact that he used his son's money, started a business that he had no idea about, and turned into a mafia boss of his own kind within the walls of his restaurant is what propelled things to spiral downwards. Well, this is a lesson for everyone out there. If you want to have a new start, then you better be smart first. Pick your choices wisely, if not, it's not only gonna drown you, but also your loved ones. Just like what happened to the Burger Kitchen, which shut down in 2012, probably for the best I'd say. But now it's time to meet the dynamic duo of destruction, Daryl and Ellen. They were the owners of Zeke's, who, to put it mildly, were greed personified. These two had an insatiable hunger for quick cash, and they didn't let a little thing like a dead man's legacy stop them. No siree. With no remorse whatsoever, they dismantled it without batting an eyelash. But wait, there's more. Their treatment of the staff was a masterpiece of contempt. Take a look at this, for example.
I'm here all the time. I don't get to eat lunch. I should have a shift meal.
This is messed up.
Slashing pay, chopping down hours, and conveniently forgetting to hand out paychecks. Oh, the joy they must have felt in their souls. And as if that wasn't enough, they had the audacity to always criticize their cooks, saying that the food was utterly terrible and insisted on ingredient skimping. I mean, who needs quality when you could squeeze out every last penny, right? And let's not forget how their calendar was full of vacations while their staff was being exploited. Absolutely heartless, soulless creatures here. You see, the restaurant was originally owned by a beloved local icon named Zeke. It was later bought by Ellen and Daryl following his unfortunate death in Hurricane Katrina. Since then, they replaced the original staff and increased the price of the food, while of course compromising its quality. This Reddit user was convinced that they were frauds. The owners would bounce off to fancy vacations, and back home, they hardly paid the head chef $400 a week. Wait, what? $400? That's shameful! Daryl is now a life coach, by the way. At this point, every second person in America is one. They aren't exactly trained psychologists to help you with anything specific. Generally, from experience, I don't recommend getting one unless you want to waste your money. Just get a therapist. Anyway, it's not like anyone would want coaching from a pompous guy like Daryl, right? Just 10 minutes into the episode and you'll know exactly why I said this. Even when Chef Ramsay called them out, they acted all high and mighty.
Restaurants don't run like this.
Disagree.
I disagree with that also, definitely.
I mean, you guys call him for help and then you act like you know better than Gordon Ramsay? Good on you. It explains why you couldn't handle Zeke's anymore and sold it off to new owners within a year of the episode airing. Now, sure, I don't know much about cooking, I can admit that, but I do know that you should never store cooked meat with raw meat. Why? Because you could end up killing your customers. But this next owner was so ignorant that he didn't even know something as basic as this.
That's raw chicken, Sammy.
We can't put them close by each other?
Oh, come on.
Meet Sammy, the owner of Sabatiello's in Stamford, who thought this about Chef Ramsay.
Here's a guy from Scotland. You know about lasagna?
Yeah, sure, why not? Basically, he was ready to go on a killing spree because someone dared to call him out on his lack of cooking/leadership skills.
I wanted to strangle my guys, especially in the kitchen, everybody. It was just a total nightmare. It was a mess.
Dear Sammy, hear this. You're a mess. I've never seen someone this devoid of self-awareness. When one of the customers complained about the awful microwave food, Sammy threatened to do this.
I thought it was a total nightmare. I kept my composure. I wanted to kill her, and I didn't.
Give this man a gold medal in customer service, quick. When his embarrassed girlfriend Lauren tried to knock some sense into him, Sammy was consumed by rage. Why? Because he had too much of an ego to apologize to a customer.
Don't tell me that all this is because of me. He's full of.
According to Sammy, he was the king, not the customer. But wait till you hear this. Following the airing of the episode, the story of Sammy Settembre took an unexpected twist. The once controversial owner of Sabatiello's found himself facing some serious legal issues. Sammy was charged with criminal offenses related to his alleged acceptance of deposits for holiday parties, despite being aware that Sabatiello's was on the brink of closure. To make matters worse, it was claimed that he went even further by charging one company over $20,000 on their credit card without authorization. But wait, there's more. Sammy's troubles didn't stop there. He faced additional charges of vandalism in connection with the damage inflicted upon the Bedford Street building during his eviction. It was reported that valuable items such as mirrors and decorative glass were smashed, resulting in an estimated $20,000 worth of destruction. These shocking details came to light when the police served him his eviction papers. Consequently, Sammy was arrested and now faces the serious charge of first-degree criminal mischief. The legal storm brewing around him served as a stark reminder that actions have consequences.
The way you're running this place is incorrect.
It's my restaurant!
The stage was set at an Italian restaurant in Colorado where owner Julie Watson ruled with an iron fist. But, of course, there was a problem. That iron fist didn't earn her any respect amongst her staff.
You don't handle this kitchen, I handle this kitchen.
And, of course, her problems ran way deeper than just a bad attitude.
The marinara is watery, and you can tell the meatballs are frozen.
I think it's fine.
Yeah, she was delusional too because of course she was. You see, Julie wasn't just serving up sass, she was dishing out a full-course meal of denial and misguided confidence. And that's not all. When Chef Ramsay came face to face with her, ready with some brutal honesty about the disastrous dishes, you won't believe how she reacted.
We make all of our sauces.
Oh, come on.
We do.
And what did she think? Well, she thought the customers loved her food.
No one complains about that salmon. People like it.
The amount of attitude she showed in the face of Chef Ramsay was something that even with all of his experience, he probably didn't see coming. How typical for Julie to blame others when she was dragging the place down with her own poor leadership.
You refuse to do anything.
But Chef Ramsay didn't stop there. He locked onto the head chef Trevor, a 22-year-old who was brimming with overconfidence.
She doesn't want to listen to anything we have to say.
While Julie was a load of BS, Trevor was something else. He dismissed the very food he had the audacity to serve, took smoke breaks like each one would be his last, and even picked fights with the servers.
You're so high all the time that when you go off drugs, you get so angry that you don't even want to work.
So overall, he was a pretty swell guy. Not. You see how challenging this is turning out to be? In this battle, Chef Ramsay had not one, but two foes to wrestle with. And boy, was it a spectacle to watch Chef Ramsay chip away at Julie and Trevor's towering egos, leaving them deflated and humbled at the same time.
You don't give a
I do give a
Where do you give a
They sure had it coming, these two. But up next, Chef Ramsay paid a visit to Nino's Italian restaurant, a place that had been around for a whopping 54 years by that point, since 1958. The business was a family affair, owned by Inga and Vincenzo Cristiano, with Inga handling the front while Vincenzo ruled the kitchen. But here's the kicker. Vincenzo was 88 at the time of filming, and this meant his kids Nino, Karina, and Michael, who had practically grown up at the restaurant, had to take up the reins from their dad in order to keep the place running. Eventually, Nino was the one who ultimately took over the restaurant. This was much to the chagrin of Michael and the other members of the family, who were less than pleased with Nino's management style. And believe me, they had more than enough reason to be mad. Nino was like a walking storm, causing chaos and clashing with everyone around him.
You're just trying to act like a fucking idiot?
You sound like a fucking idiot yourself.
And oh, the dude's got more grievances than a complaint box. He was fuming that the family had dialed up Chef Ramsay without giving him a heads up. But what else could they do? It was sinking, losing more and more customers and cash with every day that passed. And here's the kicker, Inga, bless her heart, was dipping into her retirement funds just to keep the ship afloat. Chef Ramsay rolled in and right off the bat, he couldn't help but notice the dated vibe about the place. Inga got him up to speed before gathering the family to try and hash things out. Although everyone had their own opinions, most of them thought that the food was just fine. And then came Nino, claiming that he was some sort of unsung hero doing more cleaning than the cleaning crew. But oh boy, the siblings weren't having any of it. They fired right back, saying that he spent more time each day giving excuses than actually breaking a sweat. And before you know it, Michael and Nino were locked in a heated exchange.
Just like last night, he ran up to every table and said, "Hello, my name's Nino."
Chef Ramsay decided to try the food, and guess what?
Is that a spelling mistake on there? Egg, plant, as in two separate words.
Woohoo! Menu typos! God, such a basic mistake. You'd think they'd at least try to do a little housekeeping before Chef Ramsay showed up, right? However, he decided to ignore it and go ahead with the tasting with a fresh state of mind. And that, folks, is when things went south. The chicken piccata arrived slimy and floury, followed by a lone mushy meatball and an eggplant parmigiana that didn't even get the honor of being tasted by the famous chef.
Chicken's all floury, slimy.
After the disappointing service, Chef Ramsay gathered the whole family around for a serious discussion. This time, he didn't pull any punches and flat out called the service a disaster. He also called out Nino for living in a delusion despite being the root of the restaurant's issues.
You are not in a position to take responsibility for anything.
But Nino was nothing but defiant. He bluntly brushed aside all of Chef Ramsay's food critiques like the chef was an average Joe. And then the shouting match began, with words flying around and painting a colorful scene. Finally, Chef Ramsay had decided that he'd seen enough and just left. But that really didn't put a cork in the family squabble. Nope, they were back to bickering with the spotlight on how Michael and Nino should seriously make up. It was a load of drama, that's for sure. But this next restaurant sailed right into the storm under the command of the most outrageous set of owners. If you're wondering how bad they were, then take a look at what Chef Ramsay hilariously nicknamed them.
Sleepy, dopey, and grumpy. Who am I? Snow fucking White?
These owners were dead set on turning this joint into the crown jewel of lobster spots in the heart of Manhattan. But oh boy, Black Pearl wasn't just a name, it had to have been some kind of bad omen. The episode went down in history for Chef Ramsay's now infamous comparison of dining at the restaurant only to munch on a soggy diaper. Yeah, he actually said that.
Soaking wet bread. It's like eating a fucking wet diaper.
Chef Ramsay decided to pull up a chair and have a heart-to-heart with the trio, where he laid out his concerns about the food they were dishing out.
I've never known a chef that's not allowed to season his food. Is this man your chef or is he your puppet?
But what of the owners? They were playing a blame game, tossing it around like it was a hot potato.
Oh, I get mad at them.
Why?
Because I don't think they're doing what they need to do.
And we feel exactly the same about him.
It's at this point that Chef Ramsay started to question just how committed these owners really were.
If any of you are committed to making this work, have we fallen out?
To do this, the famous chef, never one to sit on the sidelines, wanted to see the chaos unfold on a busy night with all three of them at the helm. David, one of the owners, took center stage in the kitchen, trying to juggle orders. But his lack of culinary chops and shaky confidence were basically painted on every plate. And before you know it, a parade of dishes marched right back into the kitchen.
They wanted these too well done.
Unbelievable.
Meanwhile, Greg, another owner, went out of his comfort zone in the kitchen and decided to patrol the dining area. But when a disgruntled customer sent back a dish, things went haywire. Instead of just smoothing things over, David got into a hell of an argument with the customer.
Both are terribly sand.
Yeah, there should be sand in this here. There often is, and that's why you have the broth to dip them in.
That was crazy. Trying to prove the customers wrong just to stand out in front of Chef Ramsay? I guess he forgot that Chef Ramsay wasn't blind. He couldn't see an ounce of passion from this individual towards the restaurant.
I suppose you actually don't give a f***, you know that?
I do give a f***.
And that's not it. David continued to deny whatever Chef Ramsay had to say.
The place was stinking.
It wasn't stinking.
You're blind, my friend.
Then Chef Ramsay finally realized who was responsible for the whole situation. You see, everything boiled down to one person, and that was David. And sadly, there was nothing much Chef Ramsay could do to fix him or his poor attitude. Several viewers stated too that as soon as they saw David walk through the door, they knew he was a prick.
Is that one of the owners?
Yes, it is.
Another viewer gave a small update on how David went back to his old menu after Chef Ramsay left. And he even sold the lobster machine. Man, not the lobster machine. However, in this next gripping episode, Chef Ramsay packed his bags and headed to the enchanting city of Paris, France. You'd assume that a restaurant in the heart of the culinary universe would be the furthest thing from in trouble, right? But hold your horses, because Piccolo Teatro was a whole different beast owned by Rachel McNally.
Get out.
Jesus Christ, what's the matter? Let go.
Tucked away in a land where meat dishes reign supreme, this place stood out as a vegetarian spot. Not so bad on its own, right? But the chef was practically a one-man circus, a symphony of eccentricity that didn't quite work well in the bustling kitchen. Chef Ramsay even found himself carrying the French chef out of the joint. Yeah, you heard that right. He wanted to chuck him out in the literal sense. However, that's not even the half of it, because the rest of the employees were crackheads.
Not particularly spectacularly exceptional.
But do you know who was the worst of them all? The owner herself.
Most of the customers that come here do actually leave satisfied and do enjoy the food.
While Chef Ramsay was here to help them fix things, in the process, he kinda got into a fix himself.
Bad food and bad attitude. This is going to be tough.
Yeah, in one corner the chef was in his own world, and in the other, the owner was smoking, not caring what Chef Ramsay had to say in the least. So why should Chef Ramsay go through all the trouble when the owner of the staff didn't even care? But can you believe that this next owner actually decided to kick Chef Ramsay out?
I have to accept what he says and go with it or ask him to leave.
The famous chef headed over to California for a wild ride at Sebastian's, a pizzeria with a twist. You see, the owner claimed that he was a part-time actor, but I think it was the other way around. Well, let me introduce you to one of the most explosive bosses in the world of pizzeria biz.
It's a big joke to everybody, right? They're not paying the bills. This is ridiculous.
This dude, Sebastian, was the reigning king of abrasive behavior and tantrums, something that could give toddlers a run for their money. And you won't believe the fact that he fired around 50 people in just under a year.
When he's get upset, you might see pans flying across the kitchen.
And if you don't think that's wild enough, wait till you hear this.
I've created a unique menu that nobody else has.
We have 23 gourmet flavor combinations.
Yeah, well, Sebastian took pride in being the quote-unquote genius behind every dish on the menu. But here's the kicker. His self-proclaimed brilliance backfired, leaving customers overwhelmed as they tried to navigate the menu. I mean, they practically needed a guided tour to make heads or tails of it. Now, don't get me wrong, this episode wasn't the absolute peak of Chef Ramsay's confrontations, but it definitely earned its spot in the Hall of Fame for the owner with the worst attitude. And honestly, I'm being polite here. There were way more descriptive words I could use to describe this guy.
Tomorrow I'll be sitting on the same couch, curled up with a bottle of vodka, just going
While Sebastian's menu was a jigsaw puzzle, Chef Ramsay's new menu was an absolute hit. It left customers buzzing with delight after the relaunch.
So far, everybody really likes the new menu. It's really nice.
But was Sebastian happy about it? Hell no. His stubborn ass couldn't come to appreciate the menu or the food that Chef Ramsay had laid out for him.
I want to try to go back to all of those 20 flavor combinations.
I mean, is this guy for real? Couldn't he just drop the ego for the sake of his goddamn restaurant? Well, like they say, pride cometh before the fall. But even with that in mind, nobody expected what he'd do next.
Off the new menu or off the old menu? No, the old menu.
Yep, he decided to hit the reset button by pulling out the food from the freezer and resurrecting the old menu that Chef Ramsay had all but buried in a shallow grave. And soon enough, the kitchen was thrown into chaos, caught between two conflicting menus, and it was clear as day that this huge step backwards was a recipe for disaster. No points for guessing who was responsible for the downfall of this place. Sebastian single-handedly sabotaged Chef Ramsay's best efforts to rescue the business while throwing in some dramatic tantrums for good measure. But what if the owner has absolutely no passion for their food or business?
I'm gonna do the best to get Brian more focused for dinner.
Well, this is where Hannah and Mason's takes the spotlight as one of those episodes that sent Chef Ramsay into a tailspin over raw meat. I'm talking about the moment that sparked the birth of the legendary raw meme. This time around, the helm was held by Chris and Brian, who switched gears from kitchen staff to owners. But their management style wasn't getting them any gold stars.
So Chris, why did that go out like that? Where's my car keys?
Not even a silver or bronze one at that. While one owner was scared of losing the restaurant, the other seemed pretty chill about it.
I'm not really nervous to meet Chef Ramsay. You know, we thought everything was gross.
The famous chef had no idea that a nasty surprise awaited his arrival during the Valentine dinner service.
Oh my God.
Oh man, did you catch that smile plastered on the owner's face? What was so funny about a soggy, blood-soaked raw chicken hanging out in the freezer? I mean, seriously. On one side, Ramsay was screaming his lungs out, and on the other, this dude was just, I don't know, dopey? Sure, the owners might not be as explosive as some of the other owners we've seen thus far, but trust me, they were still in a league of their own. Who in their right mind breaks out into a smile in a situation like that? And honestly, it's so hard to believe that this was actually real. I don't know about you, but that was not the right kind of calm I'd expect in a situation as charged as this. Smirking in the face of raw chicken that could have easily killed a customer? That's gotta be a new one. And well, Chef Ramsay couldn't help but erupt.
No.
I can tell you one thing, mad doesn't even begin to describe how Chef Ramsay was feeling. Well, here's hoping a staff meeting is the silver bullet they needed to get things back in gear.
What are you doing to people? Give me an answer!
But that's not the end of it. Far from it. Chef Ramsay didn't just roll his eyes and walk away. Oh no, he decided to take charge.
Okay, take me down to the fridge. I want to see how you really work.
The restaurant had to immediately be shut down just to prevent every health inspector in the state from dropping dead from an aneurysm.
Oh my God! Chris, this chicken against raw chicken!
The famous chef dug in his heels and got to work, devising a plan to turn this ship around. But that's a story for another day. For now, let's just relish the moment that became a meme, the restaurant being thrown into chaos, and Chef Ramsay doing what he does best, saving the day one raw moment at a time. But how about we multiply the arrogance by 2? What do you get? This.
It is not my fault. Whose fault is that after all? Yours? No, it's yours.
Step into the world of Italian restaurants and the cherished tradition of family preservation. But La Galleria 33 flipped that narrative on its head. Here, luck wasn't exactly on the next generation's side. In this episode, the reins of the restaurant were in the hands of 2 sisters, a duo as different as night and day. They inherited the business from their parents, hoping to keep the family's culinary legacy alive. But it ended up being much harder than it sounded.
We figured at some point we would get busy. It never took off.
One sister was grappling with alcoholism to the extent that she would even get drunk while she was on the job. On the other side of the spectrum, the other sister was the ultimate escape artist, running away from her problems faster than Usain Bolt. But what was even worse was the relationship between the staff and the owners.
This business is not under my name, it's under both of your names.
However, that's not all. Wait till you see how the owners treated them.
Go talk to the customers, go entertain them while they're waiting for the food.
God, unprofessional doesn't even begin to describe what I'm seeing here. What's more, the owners treated their customers like enemies too.
Stick your finger in the ravioli and tell me it's cold now.
Now, you might think that Chef Ramsay is all about Chef Ramsay unleashing his fiery critiques and making memorable negative quotes. But La Galleria 33 was a different breed. Chef Ramsay shifted his gears and offered a kinder approach because sometimes that's exactly what the owners needed to see some sense. This episode is a unique twist on the usual dynamic, showcasing Chef Ramsay's ability to tailor his approach to the situation at hand. Moving on, let's head to Arizona, once home to a hurricane by the name of Amy. That name should send shivers down the spine of any Kitchen Nightmares fan. If not, brace yourselves because you're about to meet the duo with the worst attitude ever.
You can go, madam. Don't come back, madam. I'll be happy not to see you here. Thank you.
These two were on a mission. They brought Chef Ramsay in not to fix their disastrous food, which, let's be honest, disaster barely even described it, but rather to validate their own belief that their service and quality were top-notch.
There's a lot of online bullies and haters and bloggers.
A deluded person who is also egotistical, name a more disastrous duo.
These are store-bought crap frozen ravioli.
They're not crap, and they're delicious.
Oh.
Chef Ramsay was left speechless. I mean, what more could you really expect from owners who treat their customers like this?
No, don't speak like this. Don't.
Fast forward to now, and Amy's baking company has been shuttered for good. I'm sure that must have brought a great sense of relief to the people of Scottsdale in Arizona. But here's the twist. Even though it's in the past, this episode remains etched in the minds of viewers. Many still consider it the creme de la creme of Kitchen Nightmares episodes, and for a good reason. One viewer of our channel even commented about how the couple blamed Chef Ramsay for ruining them. But here's the truth. They did that to themselves. But wait, because this is the kind of drama you don't see coming. Just wait until you see what he did next. This man wasn't only a wannabe actor, but also the proud owner, manager, and chef of a restaurant that he thought was famous for two things. That being wood-fired pizzas and a menu concept that would make you scratch your head. Turns out, he's also famous, or should I say infamous, for his drastic mood changes. And nope, you haven't seen anything like this before. Was he maybe putting his acting skills to practice? Well, I've yet to figure that out. But one thing I know for sure is that his eccentric behavior drew his staff nuts.
When he get upset, you might see pans flying across the kitchen.
They were terrified of him. Although Sebastian thought he was the kindest soul in the world, this man had managed to fire 49 employees over the last year. Now, that speaks a lot for itself, doesn't it? Having been in business for the last 2 years, in one of the fanciest neighborhoods you can ever think of, being Burbank, California, things were a little off. According to Sebastian, his business has been running for the longest time at a loss. His wife Nicole had to pitch in and invest $300,000 just to keep it open, or maybe it was just to satisfy her husband's ego. Sebastian's life actually wasn't that complicated. He just seemed to prefer it that way, and it showed in his menu.
I've created a unique menu that nobody else has.
What's so special about it, you might ask? Sebastian's menu was so unique that not even his staff could figure it out.
There's 21 gourmet flavor combinations. There's 20 gourmet flavor combinations. Wait.
Well, that's interesting indeed. Basically, you get to choose from a few protein options, and then you decide if you want it in a salad, sandwich, entree, or perhaps even an omelet, who knows. But wait, there's more.
If I saw it, I can do it. I mean, cause no, it's chicken. Let me start over.
And oh, you also get to pick a sauce from 20 gourmet flavor combinations. This was one of the first things that baffled Chef Ramsay when he arrived. All you have to do is just take a look at Chef Ramsay's face when Sebastian tried to explain this concept. Have you ever seen Chef Ramsay like this?
Toppings and seasonings. Strip or shrimp.
Oh wait, there's more.
With chips and gravy on the side if you'd like.
That's hilarious. It looks like I'll be adding this to my collection of GIF reactions right now. Ooh, well, now it makes sense why nobody else had a menu like this. But don't worry, because Sebastian has got this covered. Apparently, he'll cook anything you put in front of him, and I mean anything. His ability was endless, or so he claimed. And as if that wasn't enough, the menu came with a variety of hideous photos that Sebastian had photographed of the food himself. What a bonus, right? Who knew this guy was a photographer? Another talent added to his endless list of skills. It's great to see exactly what your meal might look like before you order it. But I wouldn't say so in this case.
It looks ghastly.
That's when Chef Ramsay shared a rule which I think we all should follow as well.
One simple rule. Whenever you come across a menu with photographs, get the f*** out of that.
That's a red flag right there. But it looks like Chef Ramsay was feeling a bit adventurous and willing to take a chance. So he went ahead with what turned out to be one of the most entertaining episodes of Kitchen Nightmares yet. From what I understand, Sebastian grew up on escapist fantasies of Tinseltown. He's our true Hollywood dreamer. He's got big plans and an even bigger ego, and was convinced that if he just stayed the course, he would make it big. But as you may know, things don't always go as planned, especially when you cross paths with the one and only Gordon Ramsay. Get ready to burst your bubble, Sebastian. Going back to the moment when Chef Ramsay made it to the restaurant, let's just say it wasn't love at first sight at all. In fact, he found the exterior to be downright tacky. But things got even more interesting once he stepped inside. Sebastian, the owner, greeted every single customer personally, which is a nice touch, but Chef Ramsay was still skeptical. The menu was an absolute turnoff, but Chef Ramsay went ahead and ordered the calamari, which Sebastian assured was fresh by the way. However, during a quick chat with his waitress Sonia, Chef Ramsay found out something that left him shocked.
And the calamari, are they fresh or are they frozen?
They are frozen.
Just as Chef Ramsay took a bite, he knew the waitress was right. The dish was so bad that Chef Ramsay actually had a special request to make. So, did he ask for a refire, or maybe an entirely different dish? Sebastian would have never thought in his wildest dreams that any customer would ask him for this.
Can I get you anything?
A sick bag.
That's definitely not a good sign. It looks like we've got a real culinary masterpiece on our hands here. Nah, this restaurant was so bad that it'll make you want to reach for your barf bag. Now, let's quickly sum up the experience in Chef Ramsay's own words, shall we?
Chef, and a dishonest one.
When Sonia went back to the kitchen with Chef Ramsay's special request for a puke bag, Sebastian was left fuming. So much so that his face turned red. And instead of stepping up and taking charge, guess what he did? He ran and called his parents to complain about the culinary genius. Wow, who knew this dude was a crybaby? But what you're about to see next will give you a whole new perspective on Sebastian.
I don't agree with his opinion.
Throw him out.
Wow, parenting 101. So now you know where Sebastian got all his attitude from. This grown-up man was still a spoiled brat who couldn't take criticism. Anyway, next up on the menu was the Popeye pizza, which Ramsay couldn't even stomach. There were just way too many things wrong with this thing. It was watery and the base probably wasn't fresh. But wait, wasn't this supposed to be a pizzeria? When Sonia returned to Chef Ramsay with his next dish, Ramsay really wanted to hear Sebastian's reaction to his feedback. But he was in for a rather unusual sight when the waitress returned.
Sebastian's mother would say, manja.
What the heck was that now? The famous chef was absolutely dumbfounded. But that's not gonna stop him from going ahead and giving an honest review about the food.
Looks like a can of dog food. One embarrassment to New York strip steak.
Yup, if Chef Ramsay didn't mention it, there's no way I could have guessed this was a steak. However, things took a turn when Chef Ramsay confronted Sebastian about the piss-poor quality of his food. What kind of act would Sebastian pull out now? Would he be able to save himself, or was he gonna blindly follow his mom's orders? Sebastian was ready with an answer at the tip of his tongue. It looked like he had rehearsed it through and through before Chef Ramsay had even arrived. When the famous chef asked him why he lied about the calamari being fresh, brace yourself for his reply.
I'm not gonna buy top calamari to mix in a seafood medley. We're not a 4-star restaurant.
Honestly, I can't tell if Sebastian was trying to be a comedian or if he was just in over his head. Either way, I think it's time for him to admit that his restaurant wasn't exactly a culinary destination. Unless, of course, your idea of fine dining involves a trip to the bathroom with a vomit bag. Bon appétit! Jokes aside, Chef Ramsay had to get the awful experience off his chest. He didn't mince his words when he told Sebastian that he hoped he could act because he certainly couldn't cook. Ramsay also grilled him about lying about the freshness of the calamari, and let's just say it wasn't a pleasant conversation for Sebastian.
Yeah, blowing them the other end of the fucking world.
In a rare moment of honesty, Sebastian confessed that the pizza dough was actually frozen. However, Sebastian defended himself by saying that it was a unique menu concept that had made his restaurant famous. No, it wasn't the quality of his ingredients. But Chef Ramsay isn't a big fan of overcomplicated menus and certainly not of substandard frozen food. This is definitely something that Sebastian had to learn the hard way. The world-renowned chef then walked in to observe the dinner service and saw a waitress struggling to explain the menu to the customers. Like, duh, who could even remember all that? It's almost as if they were trying to teach quantum physics to a bunch of toddlers. Apparently, it took about 20 minutes just to explain everything. 20 minutes? And by the time she was finished, the customers would have forgotten why they came to the restaurant in the first place. And Sebastian really believed that this is what drew customers into his restaurant. If that's not being delusional, I don't know what is. When Chef Ramsay checked out the freezer, he was horrified to see it was filled with frozen food. It was literally everything. I don't just mean the pizza dough. It seems like they didn't make much from scratch here, since even the sauces weren't homemade. Maybe that's why Sebastian introduced his concept menu to show that he was creative, which in truth wasn't even necessary. But Chef Ramsay was amused.
This guy is seriously off his fucking trolley.
Anyway, to make matters worse, Ramsay noticed that the wood-burning ovens weren't being used at all, but instead, they were heavily relying on microwaves. Turns out, 90% of the food was pre-packaged and frozen, and even the mashed potatoes were store-bought. When Chef Ramsay gave him a piece of his mind, this time, Sebastian didn't back down. And once Ramsay stepped out to get some fresh air, Sebastian started to celebrate a victory that he didn't even win. But who's gonna stop him from bragging about it?
Woo! I won that one.
Have you seen anything like that before? When Chef Ramsay demanded to know exactly what Sebastian had won, he went into a total spin.
I got the show? Yeah. I'll tell you what I have to show. Pride.
Ramsay was dying for a break. He couldn't forget what he had just witnessed. And when Chef Ramsay called it a day and left, Sebastian had the craziest reaction ever.
Woo! I think I won that one.
How did this guy even make it this far? This dude was crazy and didn't seem to care. He was more interested in meeting his customers and the outward appearance of his food than its actual quality. Plus, let's not forget that this man shared his grand vision of nationwide franchises for his restaurant. He wanted his pizzas appearing in the frozen food aisle of supermarkets across the country.
What? I would love to franchise this and have a Sebastian's all over the world.
Yep, you heard that right. Sebastian approved pizzas. He would have his way if he wanted to, but there was just one teensy tiny problem. He couldn't cook. I mean, he talked a lot about being able to whip up any dish. But what he really meant was that he could open a can or toss some frozen food that his wife's money could buy and call it a day. Imagine franchises. All you would get would be watery and soggy pizzas that were absolutely not fresh. So let's be real, folks, Sebastian's dream was a delusion. If he kept this up, he would be running his restaurant into the ground faster than you can say frozen pizza. I mean, how are you gonna open up franchises when you can't even keep up with one restaurant? This is a man who has never been told no in his entire life. He was definitely someone who's been coddled all throughout. And that's why he's so overconfident. In truth, he was a total train wreck in the kitchen. You know what? When you're careless, it really shows. And to top it all off, he microwaved the food, resulting in over $300 of it being comped. Bravo, Sebastian, bravo. That's where all of his profits were going, down the drain. But our man was absolutely not concerned about it.
You'll come back tomorrow, I'll be sitting on the same couch, curled up with a bottle of vodka, just going
At this point, I have no words for this guy. I mean, calling him deluded would be an absolute understatement. Sebastian was immature, irresponsible, and lived in a fantasy world. He thought this episode would actually be his shot to fame. But Chef Ramsay was quick to humble him down.
You're beyond reach, you know that.
Sebastian's entire life plan revolved around his crazy restaurant menu, which even Chef Ramsay had to admit was pretty unique. Fast forward to when Ramsay actually started making changes to the menu, Sebastian realized that the one thing that he brought to the table, a completely ridiculous ordering system, was about to disappear forever. And that's when he really started to freak out.
I have to accept what he says or ask him to leave.
Chef Ramsay brought in these super cool pizza experts to teach the restaurant staff how to toss dough like a pro. And it wasn't just for fun, it was to actually give the customers a show while they waited for their food. The staff also got a crash course on the new menu that was going to be served during the big relaunch. And let me tell you, they went all out with the makeover of this place. Ramsay even gave them a fancy new dough mixer that left one of the cooks in tears. On the night of the relaunch, Chef Ramsay even rolled out a red carpet for the staff and guests, kind of like the Oscars.
I'm very excited, and we're just gonna have so much fun.
Well, Sonia sure looked excited, but what about Sebastian? He wasn't happy at all.
I want to try to go back to all of those 20 flavor combinations. It was unique.
As the restaurant was getting ready for the relaunch, Sebastian was causing a bit of a scene in the dining room. He was shouting and ranting at his staff instead of doing what he was supposed to. He was throwing things around in a fit of rage, and nobody wanted this madman around. When the customers started coming in, Chef Ramsay saw an opportunity for Sebastian to step up and take charge in the kitchen. And you know what? The new menu was actually a hit. People were loving it and orders were flying out of the kitchen left and right. But then Sebastian made a really questionable decision. He decided to switch back to the old menu, which caused a ton of confusion in the kitchen. Chef Ramsay wasn't happy. He had a chat with Sebastian and let him know that he was disappointed in his actions and that it seemed like he was trying to sabotage the evening. And it's safe to say that things got pretty heated between the two.
But I've never, ever met someone I believe in as little as you.
Someone had to give this man-child a reality check. This has to be one of the best takedowns yet. Sebastian was so worked up that he was pacing around the restaurant and screaming even as Chef Ramsay walked away.
Unbelievable. You fucking kidding me?
Eventually, Sebastian stormed out and went looking for Chef Ramsay on the street.
That motherfucker. We're done. Get the fucking camera out of here.
Gosh, he's so hysterical. I've never seen anyone in my life behave like this before. When they finally found each other, I somehow wish they hadn't. This has to be the most heated argument any owner has ever had with Chef Ramsay.
Disappointed.
You gonna calm
okay?
down?
Stop pointing your finger at me. Are we gonna speak like men?
Sebastian absolutely lost it and had a full mental breakdown. He had the audacity to call Chef Ramsay some really vile things.
Telling you one last time, you're a fucking dickhead.
I'm in absolute awe of Chef Ramsay's restraint. This man had just redefined patience. After the fight, Sebastian got so emotional that he turned into something totally different.
It's true, some of the stuff he says. Maybe I was a little twisted with my ideas and my goals.
Was this the same guy who just insulted Chef Ramsay? Meanwhile, Ramsay had returned to the restaurant and was busy motivating the kitchen staff, who were pretty shaken up. Eventually, Sebastian showed up too, and to everyone's surprise, he really started putting in the effort. He worked hard and effectively led the kitchen, and the positive change started to show in the food as well. After the dinner service was over, Chef Ramsay gathered the staff together to give some feedback. He complimented the cooks, especially Lou Bertha and Andre, for their hard work and dedication. However, he also expressed some concern about Sebastian. Chef Ramsay didn't think the changes he put in place would last for very long. And just as Chef Ramsay expected, Sebastian went back to his old sloppy ways. So eventually, the restaurant closed down in 2008, barely a year after filming this episode. As of 2023, it looks like Sebastian has moved from Hollywood to New England. He's currently running a landscaping company and a business firm together with his wife Nicole. And thank God for that. At least the customers are now spared from the torture of choosing from that bizarre menu. He actually bagged a role in the movie Angels Around Me in 2013 as a detective. As for the restaurant, it changed hands several times after. First up, Sebastian became Robano's, an Italian restaurant who chose to keep a lot of Chef Ramsay's decor. After closing its doors in 2014, Robano's became the Red Door, which is still open and serving to this day. And the reviews seem to be very positive. It looks like this location was waiting for the right owner to take over, and I'm glad it happened. Sebastian was an arrogant bully, but his staff deserves so much better, especially Lou. If you ask me, ungrateful people like him don't deserve Chef Ramsay's time or help. I've gotta hand it to Chef Ramsay, he's a class act. Despite all the threats Sebastian was throwing his way, Chef Ramsay handled this maniac like a boss.
Nasty, you have no fucking idea.
Joker.
But who knows, there may be more owners out there who are way more ungrateful in the future.